kind of in relation to COVID, this question comes in from Katja Portnaya in Westwood, Massachusetts, who says the pandemic has made the difference between big business and small business more clear than ever. It also made it harder than ever for small businesses to thrive. All businesses were ordered closed in some states, yet Home Depot and Shop and Stop were allowed to operate. Do you think that we will ever see small businesses have a more even playing field, or is this a never-ending spiral down the rabbit hole until there's nothing but big business left?
Well, I think we will have small business as far ahead as you can see. And if you stop to think about it, every shopping center is full of small business. And now they're not as flourishing as they were a while ago, but we're not going to get rid of small business in the United States. In a sense, we need a big business. It makes sense to have something like Apple and Google as big as they are and serving as well as they're doing. And just as I didn't mind AT&T when it ran the whole television network, I don't mind Apple or Google being a big company. So I'm not worried about having some big companies and a lot of small ones. I think that's our system.
You think it's an uneven playing field right now? The Russell 2000 is more than 15% off its all-time high right now. It's had a pretty rough go, especially in recent months.
Well, if you stop to think about it, my way in life was not predicting little short-term differences between the Russell index and the Standard & Poor's index. I don't have any opinion about which index is better at any given time. I never even think about it. I'm always just looking for something that's good enough to put Munger money in, or Berkshire money in, or Daily Journal money in. And I figure that I want to swim as well as I can against the tides. I'm not trying to predict the tides. Well, if you're going to invest in stocks for the long term or real estate, of course there are going to be periods when there's a lot of agony and other periods when there's a boom. And I think you just have to learn to live through them. And as Kipling said, treat those two imposters just the same. You have to deal with daylight and night. Does that bother you very much? No. Sometimes it's night and sometimes it's daylight. Sometimes it's a boom, sometimes it's a bust. I believe in doing as well as you can and keep going as long as they let you.
Pauliani from Toronto, Canada writes in and says, do the great tech franchises of our day, specifically Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet, have the same long-term durability that Coca-Cola had 30 to 40 years ago?
Well, of course, it's a lot easier to predict who flourished in the past because we know what happened in the past. But I want to compare what's going to happen in the future. Of course, that's harder. It's very hard for me to imagine. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but I would expect Microsoft and Apple and Alphabet to be strong 50 years from now. Really strong, still strong. But if you'd asked me when I was young what was going to happen to the department stores that went broke, the newspapers which went broke, and so on and so on, I wouldn't have predicted that either. So I think it's hard to predict how your world is going to change if you're going to talk about 70, 80, 90 years. Just think, imagine they wiped out the shareholders of General Motors, they wiped out the shareholders of Kodak. Who in the hell would have predicted that? This technological change can destroy a lot of people. And I think it's hard to predict for sure. in advance. But the telephone company is still with us. It just uses a different way of doing it. So some things remain and some vanish.
About Costco. Ami Patel from California, you recently talked about bubbles and high valuations in your Sohn conference talk. Is Costco a part of that? Costco has never traded at a higher price to sales or price to earnings multiple. How should new investors think about Costco given its record run?
Well, that's a very good question, and I've always believed that nothing was worth an infinite price. So at even an admirable place like Costco could get to a price where you would say that's too high. But I would argue that if I were investing money for some sovereign wealth fund or some pension fund, and a 30, 40, 50-year time horizon, I would buy Costco at the current price. I think it's that strong an enterprise and that admirable a place. Now, I'm not saying I can't bring myself with my habits to pay these big prices, but I never even think about selling a share of Costco just because it's selling at a high price. So if you stop to think about it, I bought at Christmas time a flannel shirt, a bunch of flannel shirts at Costco. They cost $7 each, more or less. And it was a soft flannel, and it was better, and so forth. And then I bought pants. I think they were Orvis pants. And I paid like $7. They stretch around my waist, and they're partly water resistant, what have you. Costco is going to be an absolute titan on the internet because they got curated products that everybody trusts and huge purchasing power on a limited number of stocking units. So I'm not worried about, I'm not saying I'm buying Costco at this price, but I'm certainly not selling any. I think it's going to be a big, powerful company as far ahead as you can see. And I think it deserves its success. I think it has a good culture and a good moral ethos. And so I wish everything else in America is working as well as Costco does. Think what a blessing that would be for us all.
Michael Wichterly writes in, and he says, can you please update us, Charlie, on your view of 3G capital and zero-based budgeting? Has your thinking evolved over the last 5 years?
Well, of course, if you have a very rich corporation, human nature, what it is, it'll get a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of excess cost in it and a lot of meetings and so forth. And there's huge waste in that. In fact, a lot of the extra meetings make you worse off, not better off. So you're not only spending a lot of extra money. It's not that you aren't getting as much as you're paying for. Many places, after they've wrung out 30% of the excess costs, they run better than they did before. In other words, getting rid of the people and changing things around that runs better, not worse. So there's a lot of overmanning in big successful places. And of course, it's human nature that people kind of relax a little when they get prosperous and so forth. And I know a corporation, I had a friend who was on a corporation with headquarters in Europe, and they would fly him from Los Angeles to Europe on a Concorde. It cost them $100,000 to take one director to Los Angeles to Germany and back. I mean, the excess just creeps into these places. And of course it isn't good. And on the other hand, you can cut too much. And there should be some mercy for people who've been around a long time and have served well in the past. So you don't necessarily want 100% perfect efficiency. But you wouldn't want a rule that nobody could ever go to some overmanned place and cut out a lot of the fat. The director's table in the Heinz Corporation cost $600,000. The goddamn director's table. The director's table in Costco cost about $300. They're different places, different ethos. And of course, if you get fat like that, somebody like 3G comes along and says, I want to buy you and cut you back to normal. And of course, it's possible to overcut, but my guess is there's a lot of fat in our successful places. There's a lot of, think of the fat on the average rich family.
Charlie, another question from Mike Branch. He just asked,
I don't think we want unlimited fat in these places. On the other hand, we don't want too much brutality and too much. It's complicated like everything else.